Here we are at last. We've reached the end. Endings are always hard, especially when they're also beginnings. But we must keep moving, so long as we remember the people we used to be over the course of our lives. It starts out pretty ominous, with the TARDIS materializing in some Arctic tundra. The Doctor stumbles out, clearly in the throes of regeneration, and yet he resists. And to get to there, we need to go back a little while, to when, after discussing the finer points of gender among species, such as Time Lords, the Doctor proposes a test to see whether or not Missy can truly be good. She'll pose as the Doctor and take Nardole and Bill on a classic Doctor Who adventure. And while Bill is reluctant because, frankly, Missy scares her, she decides to go along with it, after making the Doctor promise to make sure she comes out of it alive. To which the Doctor offers his best effort. Unfortunately, they come across a massive colony ship stuck next to a black hole. And thanks to time dilation, the top of the ship and the bottom of the ship are running at different times, or different time speeds. So a few minutes at the top is years at the bottom. And unfortunately, after a bit of theatrics from Missy, who calls herself Doctor Who, and casually insults Nardole and Bill, a blue guy shows up, terrified that someone among them is human, and puts a hole in Bill's chest. Bill's dead. But she's only mostly dead, because apparently someone's coming to rescue her. These freaky-looking patients who seem to be sort of half dead, half alive. They take Bill and bar the Doctor from following, and promise to rebuild her. So while Bill's away, the Doctor exposits what's going on. How time dilation has allowed the crew of 50 who have yet to pick up the colonists that they're getting a hold of has evolved into a massive population thanks to the various crew members pairing off and reproducing. Hopefully they're not too inbred, because I think you need more than 50 people for a viable population. So after that, the Doctor uses some good old-fashioned Venusian Aikido to knock out the blue guy, who I believe is a janitor in reality. And Team TARDIS goes to rescue Bill, who, at that point, has been repaired. She got a bulky thing on her chest, keeping her alive, which also bars her from leaving the hospital. I guess it's got bad Wi-Fi. And Bill learns a terrible truth. First, the population of this ship is getting sick. The pollution on the deck where everyone lives is getting worse, and in order to to survive, they've got to be upgraded to the patients. And the patients have to be upgraded further. Eventually, she finds out from her friend, a hospital staff member by the name of Razor, that the upgrade is permanent and necessary. So, he tricks her into following her into the surgical theater, where she gets fitted with special headgear to make her not care about pain, which is what the patients are always complaining about, even though no one cares. So by the time the doctor and company get to where Bill is, they find she and everyone else in that city have been turned into Cybermen. Turns out the ship is from Mondas, and Razor is actually Harold Saxon, aka the Master. It seems he got his lightning condition fixed by the Time Lords, and when he came across this ship, he got stranded. One of his TARDIS's circuits blew a fuse, and he couldn't fix it, so he decided to trick the population of the ship into cyber conversion, and declares a genesis of the Cybermen. So, he teams up with Missy and betrays the Doctor. The plan is to get some Cybermen, retake the ship, and finally leave the black hole. But while the Master and Missy are gloating, the Doctor reveals that while they were distracted, he ended up reprogramming the Cybermen programming to count Time Lords as humans. So now Missy, the Master, and the Doctor have to work together to fight them off. Luckily, they have an extra ally, Bill. Somehow, someway, she's resisting the cyber control. And she still has the ability to cry, which is impossible for a Cyberman, but according to the Doctor, where there's tears, there's hope. That's a weird thing to say. So Nardal, he manages to locate a shuttlecraft, which will allow them to move up through the ship, hopefully back to the bridge. So everyone evacuates, but not before the Doctor gets grievously wounded by one of the Cybermen before Bill takes it out. And apparently that starts to trigger a regeneration. But hopefully it's not full on. Eventually they make it to floor 507, where an expedition to try and reach the bridge failed to return. Turns out everyone was just happy to be in the seemingly fresh air of an artificial farm. And so they've been resisting proto-Cybermen who sometimes manage to get to that floor. And they've been using said proto-Cybermen as scarecrows. But they're quickly losing ground. Now that they're all Cybermen on the lowest level, they have to find a way out. So, after a bit of exposition from the doctor about Bill's condition and how he hopes to possibly restore Bill to human form somehow, the doctor makes a command decision. They have to move up through the ship using the lifts that have been disguised holographically but are now revealed. And they also find out from an encounter where both masters, the Doctor and Bill, have to stop a single Cyberman, that they've already upgraded to a combat model. So they don't have much time. So the Doctor has Nardal hack the ship's systems to turn the entire floor of the farm level into a massive potential bomb. And so, after a few explosions take out some of the Cybermen, the Doctor rigs up his sonic screwdriver to trigger the whole floor to go kaboom, and he stays behind along with Bill to buy Nardal enough time to get the women and children and other adults up to the next safe floor. Meanwhile, the Master and Missy decide to leave, since Missy had a special foreknowledge about needing some spare circuitry for her TARDIS. But not before they get an earful from the Doctor, trying to convince them one last time to fight by his side as their friend. Only the protests fall on deaf ears. For a while. Just before the Master and Missy get into the lift to go down to the TARDIS, his TARDIS, Missy stabs him, which will trigger his regeneration into her. And so, out of spite, before chuckling maniacally and leaving, he shoots Missy in the back with his laser screwdriver, killing her for good. Maybe. So, sadly, the Doctor gets separated from Bill and eventually gets shot in the back, thus triggering his regeneration. So, with nothing left to lose, he triggers the floor to go kaboom and take out all the other Cybermen, which hopefully will buy Nardal and his newfound companions enough time to regroup. Although Nardal's not happy about being in charge of people. Apparently he was a bit of a con artist back in the day, and he's worried that he'll fall back into old habits. But the Doctor trusts him. So, after the big explosion, Bill finds the Doctor and once again cries. But for some reason, it starts raining. And it's revealed that Heather, the Star Girl, who has become an alien pilot, was with Bill the entire time, hiding in her tears. That's what allowed a Cyberman to cry. And so, Heather restores Bill to human form and then makes her a pseudo-water creature like her. And they take the Doctor back to the TARDIS. She pilots the ship to parts unknown. And she makes Bill an offer. See the galaxy with her. And so Bill says, yeah, let's do it. She says goodbye to the Doctor, and She and Heather go off and have their own adventures. And the Doctor, who's starting to feel the regeneration, continues to resist. It seems the ship has landed somewhere in an Arctic tundra, and the Doctor stumbles out, verbally resists his regeneration, and catches the attention of someone else. A little old man who is also resisting regeneration. And he too introduces himself as the Doctor. None other than the first Doctor. This time played by David Bradley, who played the villainous Solomon from way back in the dinosaur episode. The Doctor is rather gobsmacked, seeing his past self, and even more so, wondering why he's resisting regeneration, and realizing that paradox is going to really screw up time, which is evident when the snow falling around them freezes in place. Cut to World War I, and some poor British officer is in a Mexican standoff with a German soldier in a crater. He exposits that he doesn't want to die and wishes that he could speak German so he could at least talk to the other guy. But then something happens. He ends up getting dropped into the middle of the Arctic after hearing a loud error message. And he comes across the doctors at which point they introduce themselves. Well, he doesn't give his name, but the doctors give their names. And then they get interrupted again by a weird light. They get in the TARDIS, and the first Doctor makes a couple of remarks about how it's too bad Polly is not here. Yeah, he left Ben and Polly back in the Arctic, well, the earlier Arctic, and he says that Polly should have cleaned the TARDIS. Yeah, he says a couple things that are a little iffy, but the Doctor, our Doctor, does gently admonish him. Anyway, after trying to figure out what's going on, the TARDIS gets taken aboard a spaceship run by something called Testimony. It seems these glass creatures extract something from the dead at their point of death. What it is, we don't know, but the Doctor declares that if he doesn't like what's going on, he'll stop them. And then two things happen. Number one, the first Doctor gets a glimpse of the future and how much of a warrior he becomes. And the testimony mentions the Valeyard and the Pandorica and how the Doctor destroyed Skaro. And the testimony also conjures Bill out of thin air with some gaps in her memory, but basically she says she's Bill. So after the Doctor has heard his fill, He herds everybody back into the TARDIS and tries to use it to escape, only to be caught again. Luckily, they get back onto the surface of the tundra and evacuate to the First Doctor's TARDIS, which our Doctor then pilots perfectly through the vortex in a beautiful sequence and takes the ship to the weapon forges of Villengard, which apparently the Doctor blew up at some point. Because now it's a refugee camp for one refugee. And he's taken them there to talk to the most comprehensive database ever, because earlier he and his counterpart noticed that the glass avatar they were speaking to wasn't a perfect simulation of a face. It was asymmetrical, which means it could have been based on a person. So the Doctor needs to get answers. And so he goes out into a ruined city and tracks down none other than Rusty, the Dalek-hating Dalek. And after some negotiation, gets it to tell him about testimony, which is actually a peaceful operation which allows people at their moment of death to live on as glass avatars thanks to downloaded memories. And we also find out that, yeah, Bill is a glass avatar, but she is, for all intents and purposes, Bill Potts. And after getting the British officer to admit that he really doesn't want to die, she then gets the First Doctor to admit what he went looking for when he left Gallifrey. Turns out he was curious. There's good and evil in the universe, and evil, for all intents and purposes, should win, because good is dumb, as Dark Helmet once put it. Well, in this case, good isn't a viable survival strategy. You don't become the dominant species of a planet by being nice. And that's what the Doctor went looking for, to find out the truth. And Bill reveals that, yeah, she was there to collect everyone's testimony. Although, the Doctor insists that his testimony would shatter a glass avatar. So he's kind of stuck. But now that everyone knows the truth, it's time to fix time. Because both Doctors deciding not to regenerate is what screwed time up in the first place. So, first things first, they gotta put the officer back where he was at the moment of his death. Luckily, he's ready to go. He's at peace. And he asks that the First Doctor look in on his family from time to time. He's got 2 boys. And they've got some living to do. Because one of those boys ends up being the direct ancestor of none other than Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. Yep, the officer is a Lethbridge Stewart. And that's why he was chosen out of all the potential people in the universe to meet the doctors. So, the doctors drop him off in his crater, and wouldn't you know it, thanks to a little finagling by our doctor, the Lethbridge Stewart does not die, and neither does the German officer. Turns out they're just in time for the Christmas armistice, when all those soldiers and all those filthy foxholes and trenches just stopped fighting and started being kind. The first, last, and only time this has ever happened. Everybody celebrated Christmas. And so, once the first Doctor realizes that this is what it means to be a Doctor of War, to give peace a chance, he realizes he's ready to regenerate now. And maybe so is our Doctor. And so, in one of the most brilliant sequences since the 11th Doctor gave his speech and regenerated, the first Doctor heads back to the Arctic tundra to collect Ben and Polly and to start his journey the long way around, once again regenerating for the first time. And nowadays, so can we enjoy the adventures. But back to our Doctor, who not only gets a visit from Glass Avatar Nardole, so everybody could say goodbye properly, with a kiss on the cheek, Glass Avatar Bill restores the Doctor's memory of Clara, so he can properly be at peace. After expositing that he wishes he could have a rest, and they admit that he could have a rest, but everyone in the galaxy would go cold because of it, as a consequence. So after a tearful goodbye, the Doctor activates the TARDIS and gives his future self a message, which includes stuff like never be cruel or cowardly, always be kind, and never eat pears. Again with the pears. He regenerates once again. This time, not damaging the TARDIS too badly, but when he looks in the mirror, he sees a blonde woman. But before she has a chance to do anything except push a single button on the console, the whole TARDIS goes sideways, dumps her out into the middle of the air, and when the center column starts exploding, the TARDIS moves off without her. And so, the era of the 13th Doctor starts with chaos. She's falling through the air. Where she's going, we don't know. Whether she'll survive this regeneration, we still don't know. But luckily, At the end of April, I'll be able to review those episodes and fill you in. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, never be cruel or cowardly. And if you are, make amends. But never fail to be kind. And taste pears before you say never eat pears. See you in a few weeks, hopefully. Till then, Doc.